Our next guest is Dr. Ada Lee, Vice President at BEworks, and the question she answers is, what are the pitfalls of market research and how do we overcome them? The title of her talk is Lessons for the Field to Overcome the Say-Do Gap. At BEworks, Ada oversees innovative projects in healthcare, financial services, retail, and more. This broad expertise and strategic oversight gives her a unique perspective on how organizations can more deeply and accurately understand consumer needs. Ada holds a PhD in cognitive neuroscience from the University of Toronto and was a postdoctorate fellow at York University prior to joining BEworks. Her award-winning research has been published in top-tier scientific journals on a array of topics including attention, integration, and decision-making. Looking into the mechanism that drives behavior change, Ada has adopted a wide range of research methods throughout her career, including neuroimaging to motion tracking. Ada now brings her expertise in the integration of research methods to help companies and organizations solve real-world challenges all over the world.
What if I told you that the way we've been thinking about voice of the customer research is wrong? What if I told you that one of its biggest flaws is that it fools us into thinking that we know our customers way better than we actually do? And that although this type of research may feel good, it can ultimately lead us astray. Now, depending on who you are and what you do, my statements are probably making you feel quite uneasy. We have a proposed solution. Through more than a decade of solving real-world challenges, we have come to learn that we can overcome the shortcomings of traditional voice of the customer research by integrating it with behavioral science methods. This is the future. Let's start our journey together by talking about beer. Yes, beer. Now, a few years ago, we worked with one of the world's largest multinational alcoholic beverage companies. They were preparing for the launch of an in-home draft beer device. So essentially, this was a machine that dispenses beer on tap in people's homes. What they wanted to understand were two things. Number one, how should they market this device? And number two, when the device is in people's homes, how will they use it? How can we get them to use it more often? The machine, of course, is of noble cause. A machine like this would effectively reduce hundreds of billions of cans that are produced globally each year. Now, sadly, upon launch, the machine did not meet expectations. People either didn't buy it or they didn't use it. And what we learned is that people closeted the machine. After using it for a few times because it was fun and new, the machine then simply went straight into the closet, never seen nor heard again, out of sight, out of mind. This company didn't just blindly launch this new product, of course. They conducted a vast amount of research. One of their most memorable works was a series of focus groups where participants tested the machine, gave feedback on whether they buy and use it at home. The feedback was resoundingly positive. But upon further inspection, the feedback was problematic because people were getting progressively drunk as the session went on. This made people increasingly willing to say yes and respond positively to any questions asked of them. By the end, the company knew that there was a problem with how they were using the voice of the customer research. That is, they had been using it to do testing and to validate their plans, rather than to use it to make observations and hypotheses that are subsequently tested with a more systematic and rigorous approach. And the fact is, those of you who are familiar with voice of the customer research, you know the problems that can arise with this kind of research. The first set of problems are around simply asking people what they think. Some problems are group-based. Now, if the method involves collecting information through a group setting, you may be familiar with the issue of groupthink. That is, the tendency for a group of people to reach consensus about something without much critical thought. This is due to our desire for harmony and for conformity within a group. It can be really hard to go against the grain or become a naysayer. Related to this, you may face social desirability issues. That is, people want to look good in front of others, and this influences what people end up saying, even if they don't fully believe in it. Now, some other problems might be individual-based. People can have flaws in what they are able to remember, or their memory might be affected by availability biases, that is, what immediately comes to mind, or confirmation biases, that is, only attending to things that are consistent with their initial beliefs. Now, beyond problems with asking people what they think, there are problems with simply asking people what they will do. The biggest one of these is the say-do gap. How many of you actually follow through on doing all the things you say you will do? Exercise every night, eat better, save for retirement, recycle your old batteries? Now, dating back to as early as the 1930s, the say-do gap is arguably one of the most studied topics in behavioral science. And in brief, what we know is that the problem with asking people what they think they will do in the future is that we tend to be too optimistic about our future behavior. In fact, recent meta-analyses tell us that our intentions predict actual behavior less than 40% of the time. Now, this link between intention and action is even worse when the intention is for hypothetical imaginary scenarios or for a behavior that will occur in the far future. So, there we have it, challenges with the voice of the customer. It feels right, it feels good, and it feels logical to get the voice of the customer, but as researchers, we need to be aware of the biases inherent in this method. How do we overcome this problem? What we propose is this: pair voice of the customer research with behavioral science methods. At a glance, our behavioral science method includes 5 key steps. Let's very quickly go through these steps together. The first step is discovery. Get a lay of the land and understand the challenge. What is the behavior you're trying to change, and what do we already know about the challenge and the target customer? Now, this step could involve reviewing outputs from market research to help you understand what are the existing assumptions and hunches about the problem. And the key is this: voice of the customer can help you understand what is known and can help you inspire new ideas. And voice of the customer research is great as a hypothesis generator, but not so much as a hypothesis tester. In our beer machine example, the target behavior was to encourage people to purchase the machine and then use it on a weekly basis at home. So if you don't know much at this point in time about how people consume alcohol or what types of alcohol are most popular, conducting market research at this point in time is key. The next step is behavioral diagnostics. The focus here is to diagnose the why. Why are people behaving in the way that they are or they aren't? What biases and psychological barriers get in the way? What behavioral enablers exist? Critically, we need people to respond to scenarios that reveal their true preferences rather than just their stated needs. So now that you know what the barriers and the enablers are, we can dive into ideation. This is the third step. This is where we generate ideas on how to solve the challenge. And the question we want to answer is how? How do we overcome the barriers, such as the closeting effect? What hypotheses and interventions can we develop to change people's behavior? For our beer machine example, the question we asked was this: how do you break people's long-held habits around single-use products and encourage them to start using more sustainable, refillable containers? And what we know is that when we want people to overturn age-old habits, we need to make sure that they do not revert to former habits at the first sign of friction. For the beer machine, our diagnostic assessment indicated that the primary barrier was the status quo. People preferred to stick to their old ways of drinking beer and generally didn't know how to incorporate the new device into their beer drinking routine. So therefore, our goal was to create a new habit loop by replacing the beer in the refrigerator with the beer machine. And our idea was this: we need a way to disrupt the existing habit loop and help reinforce a new one. Our intervention was to piggyback on the device's companion app and then send push notifications to users. These notifications would essentially preemptively remind people about how much fun it would be to use the device for upcoming events, such as sports competitions or social gatherings. Now, in step 4, we test our ideas using randomized controlled experiments. In our example, 100 beer drinkers were randomly assigned to one of 3 conditions. In the experimental condition, participants were given the beer machine plus mobile notifications. And then to help us determine whether the notifications truly worked, we included 2 other conditions. One, a condition where participants only had the machine, no notifications. And a control condition where they did not have the machine, nor notifications. Now, people's beer consumption patterns were monitored over a 5-week period, both using daily self-report as well as tracking built into the device itself. What we found is that the notifications triggered spikes in in-home beer machine usage over the next 24 hours as well as into the next evening. This indicated that having well-timed interventions effectively helped people incorporate the refillable machine into a new consumption routine. This example illustrates 2 key points. 1, to properly test ideas, we need to run experiments where different conditions are created and compared. This allows us to determine cause and effect. Did it work? And if it does, by how much and why? We need to go simply beyond capturing what people say they will do and really collect data that reflects people's actual behaviors. The last step is choice architecture. Knowing what you know now about what will change people's behavior, we can provide a recommendation about what should be implemented, what should not be, and why. And that's it. This is the end. And the key takeaway is very simple. Voice of the customer research methods need to be combined with behavioral science methods to mitigate risk. Voice of the customer research is very powerful upfront to help us understand a problem, but ultimately you need behavioral science methods to generate and test solutions that will solve the challenge itself. And while voice of the customer research has gained a lot of traction in the last 30 years, behavioral science research is now also gaining significant traction, with a 700% increase over the last 10 years in companies that use behavioral science. So join us in this movement, because more deeply understanding your consumer needs will help you design better solutions.